Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tia, and welcome back to the Blueprints for Better Teaching podcast, where we dive into how we create trauma-informed, compassionate environments for students, families, and communities alike. Today's episode is really close to my heart because I'm joined with my mother, who is someone who has lived, experienced parenting children who have come from trauma backgrounds, including myself. She adopted three children and brings so much insight and love to everything she does. Thank you for being here today, Mother.
You're welcome to Tia Grace.
Um, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about just who you are, what you've done with your life, schooling, all of that kind of stuff.
I am Tia Grace's mother. I have three adopted children, a son and two daughters. Um, I work outside the home. However, when the kids were young, I stayed home. I have a 4-year business degree from Lemoyne College, and worked up until, I tried to have a family naturally or biologically. And then when that happened, I stopped working, and then Tia Grace came to us, and I've stayed home for probably about 12 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So let's just start with the basics. This is just the background information, and we're going to talk about your parenting style. So how would you describe your overall parenting style?
I would say I'm strict,
Mhm.
um, tough, but I would say I parent with compassion. Um, think I had a more open relationship with my children than I did when I was a kid. I was really strive to make sure that my children could come to me, tell me anything, as long as it was the truth, and fair but tough, I would say.
I think I agree with that. Um, do you mind telling me a little background about just each of us? You don't have to go super deep into it, but maybe just a little like brief overview of each child.
Okay, so Tia Grace was our first baby. She was 1 month old when she came to us. She had been born cocaine exposed, so she had some physical issues that had to be dealt with. And she was little in size. And then my son came to us. He was 3.5. He came from an abusive situation. So he definitely had a lot of trauma. And in the meantime, we had already started to adopt from China, which was where Tia's sister came from. And she was about one when we brought her home.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important because every adoption story is layered and they're all different. So it's good to have a background on each child when you are dealing with them. Um, so how did you come to the decision to adopt and what was that process like?
Well, we, tried to get pregnant through IVF twice, did not work. Um, and Tia's father had worked with a man who had adopted two little girls, I think, out of the foster care system. So we went to a meeting, became foster parents, and went through all of our training. And within, I think, a week of that, we got a phone call. And Tia Grace came to us, who was a month old. And then I guess maybe 6 months later or 7 months later, a little boy, we got a call that it was a little boy available. It was supposed to be a placement just for a week. It was an
Yeah.
emergency removal. So he came to us at night.
And how was
Um,
that for him?
Pretty traumatic. He came in, remember he had a little jack-o'-lantern, plastic jack-o'-lantern filled with army men. That's what I remember. And when the caseworkers went to leave, he wanted to go with them. Like he was confused. He didn't know. And come to find out, he'd been shuffled from home to home.
Mm.
And he was pretty trusting. He called us mom and dad right from the beginning. And originally, I tried to discourage that because I thought he was only going to be with us a week, and I didn't really want him to feel like he was being ripped out of another home. But he kept calling us mom and dad, and I just figured, well, he probably that's what he needs. So we just let him call us mom and dad. And then in the meantime, we had already started the adoption process for China, which was an extremely long process filled with a lot of paperwork, a lot of government regulations.
Yeah.
And then I guess, so your brother was in kindergarten and you were in your first year of like nursery school, and we
Yeah.
went over to China, sister.
Awesome. I know that it must have been really emotional, especially for Kareem because he was at the like 3 years old, and I feel like that's the age where children kind of being conscious with their situation. Um, and the paperwork is just in general is probably a lot. Um,
Well, yeah,
but
when you adopt through the foster care system, you have to meet certain regulations. You have to have a caseworker come to your home once a month to check on the child. You have a safety inspection of your home once a year. I mean, I'm talking basic stuff like you have a running refrigerator, that the child has a bed, any cleaning products or alcohol is locked up or put up where the child can't get at it. It's pretty basic. I think it should be a little more stringent than it is. But the problem with my son was we still had parental involvement, meaning he went down once a week to the DYFS office and had a visit with his biological mother. And um, he definitely was traumatized from that. He would come home, would act out. So we had to kind of try to calm him down again. Um, the worst part, she like made promises to him and never seemed to deliver them, such
yeah.
as, forgot your birthday presents in the car, and then they would just never materialize week after week. So that was difficult. That was hard for him.
Yeah, because that it's like as a child, you expect your parent, especially when you're kind of stripped and you're going house to house and you're having like different adult figures in your life or parental figures in your life. It's like you don't even you know that that's the one person that was the constant, and when they don't go through with everything that they say, it's like they don't trust anybody. So it's like now with teachers or friends or
Right.
even new foster parents, like they're not going to trust them, and that's really sad.
Difficult to trust. When he met your father, he really hadn't had a male figure in his life, not a father, grandfather, but he bonded very quickly with him because
Hmm.
he was a consistent male figure who was there every morning and every night and was kind to him. And he hadn't had that before.
Yeah. Yeah, that is that is tough. But I'm glad that obviously he had you and me because I was there at that point and
Yes,
dad
you
and the
are.
doggies. Um but now to shift over to just a different topic, the adjustments in the parenting approach after adopting, did you have to make any changes to how you approached your parenting?
Well, you were my only infant. You said you were a month old, so we did not have parental involvement, so it was much easier.
Mhm.
Although DIFUS did come to visit every month to check up on you. I definitely had to adjust my parenting style for your brother. He had ADD, and I knew pretty much from the beginning. He hadn't really been exposed to things like numbers and colors, so I knew there was an issue. Um, he needed a structured environment,
Yeah.
and he had trouble like when the teacher would speak to the entire class. So when
Mhm.
he originally went to the kindergarten, I asked to have him tested because I knew there was an issue. He had a horrible kindergarten teacher, and she didn't see it. So when he was in first grade, I guess we had a much better teacher. School system evaluated him, and he had his IEP then, which
Yeah.
helped
How was that
greatly.
process? Like when that was all going down? Like did
Well,
the
the
teacher
IEP, The IEP process is um, difficult.
Yeah.
You have to be your child's advocate because the school system, as they go through the years, the school system will, because you go in once a year to reevaluate, the school system will, at certain points, try to take services away from you because it does cost the school district money. You have to be extremely firm and say, I'm not going to agree to that. And what I found most times is, in fact, all the time, is that the school system would back off once they knew you meant business and you were not going to let any services go. If it was something
Yeah.
he truly didn't need, I would have let it go, but he needed the services he had. So you have, as a parent, you must fight for your child. You must be their advocate because if you're
Yeah.
not going to do it, someone else is going to do it.
And that's the thing that I feel like a lot of parents or just people in general, they kind of are in denial when their child is going through something or when the teacher says like, "Hey, like I think maybe like they need to do a test just to see if they have ADD or whatever it is." They just don't want to have a label on their child because they don't want their child to be different. So then they don't get the services that they deserve. And then even when they do have the services that they deserve, the school tries to take it away because, like you said, it's money for them.
You have to
And
know your child. You have to know your child. And it's not a weakness to say your child has an issue and needs help. It doesn't give them an
yeah,
advantage. It evens the playing field. If my
100%.
child has an issue where, he can't decipher sounds, auditory processing, he needs a teacher that's mic'd. That's not giving him a benefit. That's evening the playing field so that he can concentrate.
And it's about equity.
And I don't think as many, well, I think some parents do have issues with labels. In fact, I know they do. But you have to do what's best for your child.
Yeah.
It's
Because
not,
you don't want your
it's not
child to
shameful
suffer
to ask for help.
100%. I know you said in the beginning, when we were talking about like the keeping promises and how the promises would be broken, do you feel like when during like just parenting in general, like keeping those promises and trusts within you and the promises that you make to him were really important?
I do because, little kids remember. And again, like when it's his birthday and they say, we forgot the gifts in the car, the next week, there's no presents next week. So if you're going to say to him, I'm going to take you to get ice cream, and you don't, then he's going to think, well, same thing. Nobody's keeping a promise that they meant to me. I think it's very important to make little goals and keep them, and then celebrate that small goal. So if you have
Yeah.
a child who has an IEP or has issues, you can't have the same goals as a parent whose child is on the normal track, is
Yeah.
on the track that just goes through school. You have to parent differently.
Yeah. Um, Do you think that having like routines and stuff in just the home environment helped especially when we were younger?
I think consistency and a structured schedule is extremely important. You kids got up at the same time, you went to bed at the same time. I was not a parent that if I was out, would put my kids down on somebody's bed. If my kids' bedtime, I went home and they went to bed 7:30, 8 o'clock. When you were littler, it was earlier. You needed your rest. And I think consistency, and again, showing up every day, wake up every day, that parent is there. You go to night, that bed, that parent is there. The next morning, you're there. Um, and if you go to the store, you come home. I don't say I'm going to go to the store and not come back for a month.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very important to build trust, especially in a child that's been traumatized.
hmm Now we're gonna shift. Thank you for all of those responses.
Yeah.
And we're gonna shift over to talking about just trauma-informed practices as a whole. So, how has your specific understanding of trauma shaped the way you parent?
Yeah, well, I learned as I went along because I wasn't really sure how to parent someone who was traumatized. Um, and it was a lot of trial and error. And I'm sure, in fact, I know I made mistakes along the way. I think you have to be patient, and I think you have to understand that You cannot parent a child with ADD or ADHD the same way you parent a child who doesn't have it, because
Hmm.
things in their life are just perceived differently.
Yeah.
Like when we would be out somewhere, I would say, okay, we're leaving in 10 minutes. Okay, we're leaving in 5 minutes. As long as he understood that there was a time limit, that we weren't just getting up and leaving and going, did not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be a meltdown or a tantrum. But giving him um, like a countdown, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, he was fine with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he knew that when we said 5 minutes, it meant 5 minutes. It didn't mean an hour.
And I feel like that kind of ties into like the routine, like having a set schedule of like what's gonna happen. I feel like that also makes a child or just a student who has dealt with trauma feel less stressed because they're not like waiting for what's gonna happen next or something like, you know what I'm saying? I know you know what I'm saying.
We were lucky he had several really great teachers that, like, you need a teacher that just doesn't teach to the class. So some of these teachers, they would try Avenue A. If that didn't work, they went down Avenue B, and if Avenue B didn't work down, she went down Avenue C,
Yeah.
and including like making sure he wrote down his assignment in his book, because
Hmm.
he would forget to do that. Having checks and balances at school helped, and we had some really great teachers, really, that made a huge difference.
And so like those kinds of supports, would you say that like the school resources, like you said, the teachers, the community were really helpful, I guess in Manalapan where we grew up?
Yeah, especially when they were young. Um, like again, he was in resource room for a lot of the subjects, and we had some really great teachers who really took the time and effort. I also made sure everybody was tutored every summer, that
Yeah.
you read books, or I bought books you had to do math
I
in,
remember
uh,
those.
right? And your
I do.
brother had, someone would come every summer, one of the schools, and would tutor them all summer long, like, once a
Yeah.
week, nothing too strenuous, because when you're a kid, the summer is supposed to be fun. But I kept everybody engaged and informed, because it's a long period for a kid who doesn't really like school to
Hmm.
stop in June and then go full back in September. It's hard transition.
Yeah, it's good to find also like the right support system and like obviously a good school is important.
Hmm.
And I think we definitely did have a good education when it came to like elementary school, even like kindergarten, like preschool, all of those grades.
You had a
Um,
very good nursery school at Bridges and Manalapan. Clark Mills was a wonderful elementary school who had a really great principal who you could approach. And I was very involved. I volunteered at everything. I was class mother every year. I volunteered in the library. I was in the library twice a week.
you also
So
went to Cream's school in Red. I remember you went to their
yeah,
class. You
yeah,
went to the
the
classes and stuff.
mystery reader. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's important to volunteer as much as you can. If you're a working mother, it's definitely more difficult, but I stayed home for a reason. There are sacrifices you make to be home, but we made them.
I know,
I was
and
happy
I
to.
know that, yeah, and I know that some families don't have that like I guess ability to do that because some
Mhm.
families, single mothers, single fathers,
Right.
like they're working constantly so they can't step up, but it's also important for the teacher to reach out to families, give them flyers or just information of how they could help their child, even if they can't go to the little event or class party or go to the
Right.
library and volunteer there or the bookstore and stuff like that. But I really thought that it was amazing that you were always there. Like I love that you were always there because I would know like there was an event, like my mom's gonna be there, like I get to see my mom, like that was always really cool. And I think that even for me, Kareem and Abby, like we all loved that. That was one of like the highlights of my elementary school years because we knew you were going to show up. Showing up, I feel like, is super
Oh,
important.
showing up is everything, especially to a
It
kid who's
is.
been, abandoned, one relative, and then dropped off. Not, I don't want to say abandoned, dropped off at a relative, and then that parent isn't seen for a month, 2 months, dropped off
Mhm.
another relative, And I think it's also important that teachers, what I love best was when I would get a good teacher call. They would call to say, I'm reporting good. They, this is what happened. They're attentive. They're doing well. I think that's really important for a teacher to call a parent, not only with bad information, but with good information. And
Yeah.
those are my favorite calls because I got my share
Yeah.
of problems.
Yeah. And I feel like that every teacher should do that, even if it's like I understand if a teacher can't do it every single day with every single child, but like weekly, like bi-weekly, something like that, I feel like is super important just to give the parent insight of how their child is doing,
Yeah,
good
I
and
mean,
bad,
a
like you
call once
said.
in a while is a call once a semester, as long as
Yeah.
that parent knows that you know their child.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have to
100%.
know your child. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
100%.
Yes.
The underneath the behavior. I love that. We're going to shift over to now triggers and emotional support. So for that question or that section, I wanted to ask, are there any particular triggers that teachers or caregivers should be aware of? Like when you're working with a child that has trauma?
Yes, I think so. Well, when I was a parent, I used to, especially with your brother, would email that teacher in advance of the first day and introduce myself, tell them a little bit about him, what he really needed to be successful. He had a number of the same resource teachers year after year, which was helpful.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely, you don't know. It could be a bell ringing, a loud noise, arguing that can trigger something in a child that you have no idea what it was. You just see the acting out. You don't see the trauma behind what that sound meant to that child.
Yeah.
Like your brother you know, had issues with the dark, but when you come from a violent home, a lot of that violence happens at night.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all connected. That's like little things like that. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that they are connected. So as a teacher, you kind of have to like kind of look under the underlining of things or the underbelly of it or just deeper into it. But as a parent, I think it's like you said, it's important to advocate for your child. So the fact that you would email the teacher beforehand is great. And even like um I know in elementary school teachers would give out like a parent teach or a like an info packet before school would start and they would have like the all about me and you could fill it out for your child or
Mhm.
just contact information so you could have like that kind of line of communication constantly, which I think is important. Um
I also think it's important that those teachers really take the time to read these IEPs,
yeah,
see
that's
what's in the
really
IEP.
important. Yeah, 100%.
It's very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, because I know, I mean, I'm obviously my majors, I'm specializing in students with disabilities. So I have taken a special education class and even with classroom management we and my science class, we've done like lesson plans and the accommodations. Like that's not only that's just for honestly like every teacher needs to be doing that. So even if you don't have the education for like special education, you need to learn how to do it. And I mean, I'm learning
That
right now.
IEP, right? That
It's so
IEP, I believe, is
important.
available to every teacher. And it's
It
also
is.
important that you keep up on that IEP. If you see a big change from, say, fourth to fifth grade, that you need something else added in there, then you have to fight for that and make sure that gets added to the IEP.
100%.
That's
100%.
critical.
Yeah. Um, so we're just gonna keep talking about the triggers and emotional support. When your children, because you have three of them, are emotionally dysregulated, what are some ways you help them? We could talk about when we were younger up until even now.
I think you have to have an open line of communication with your child. I, the one thing I always have told my children is make good decisions and don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me the truth. Because especially as you get older, you're an adult, you have to be truthful. When they're little, sometimes they would hide things, even like your brother sometimes would hide food.
Hmm.
So you just have to talk about it. And yeah, just you got to be on the watch, look for every day. You have to be
Yeah.
vigilant.
Yeah, I think that it's also like with children, especially with food. I know that like a lot of children hide food because they like
Mhm.
food insecurity, and it
Right.
and I'm not trying to compare humans to animals, but animals do that too. They hide food a lot, when they don't think they're gonna get food. And with Theo, we even see that.
Mhm.
And even though Theo is a dog, he has been through a good amount of trauma, and we see
Even
that.
though
Like
he was
we
on
could
the
see,
streets, right? Mhm.
yeah, for a long time. But I feel like it's just like you said, you have to have an open line of communication, talk to your child and be like, you don't have to hide your food. Like you're gonna be
Right.
given food. Like you're gonna be able to eat. Like you're fine or you're
You
good.
have
Like
to know
stuff
your
like that.
child. You have to know what your
Yeah.
child is capable of and not capable of.
Hmm.
Putting your head in the sand and saying my child doesn't have an issue when they clearly have ADD or any other issue doesn't help. If they have to take medication, then that's a step you go. It's a step you take to make getting through that school day easier on your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one has to know about that at school. I mean, the teachers or the nurse, but other than that, it's no one's business.
100%. And like obviously, I feel like it's also important to realize like the small things, like the sudden changes like a child's behavior is from like the moment they wake up in the morning to when they come home from school to see if something shifted. Because I know that I don't know, a lot of children um I don't know if I have issues with that, like going through the whole day just being happy. And
Hmm.
it's just important to always circle back with your child after the end of the day. Like
Right.
always.
And if you think something's wrong, you can't get a lot of information out of your child, then you call the school and you ask to
Mhm.
speak to the teacher. Or if you're not getting cooperation from the teacher, then you go above their head. You can't be afraid to step on toes because it's your child.
Yeah,
And would do whatever I had to do. I really don't
I
care if
know.
somebody got upset. I don't care.
This is a great segue into the next part because we're going to talk about school and community involvement. Um, so I wanted to ask, what are some ways that teachers in school can make adopted or trauma affected kids feel safer?
Um, I remember one time a little kid said to me, I think it was when you were little, they said to me, are you Tia's real mom? And I like touched myself and I said, feel me. I said, I'm real. I'm her real mom.
Yeah,
Um, and even like when I introduced myself, I said, try to have children naturally, biologically. Naturally means if it's not biological, it's not natural, which is not okay. I'm very
yeah.
big on people using the correct words.
Hmm.
We always your brother had a different last name up until he was like in second grade. And then we made a big deal out of it. We made a big deal out of the adoption. Always celebrate every year. Even now, we celebrate everybody's adoption day. Um, and I think also by being involved, going to parties, having your kid involved in community sports, the kids know the parents and the parents know the other parents. So
Yeah,
when your child is African American and his two parents are obviously Caucasian, they're so used to seeing that they don't ask questions because they
yeah.
just accept it because that's just how it's always been.
Yep.
And I think that's critical that because children don't know, they don't ask questions out of trying to be malicious. They're
They
just
don't. They never
curious.
do. They never do.
Parents can be malicious and you have to deal with them on a case by case basis, which
Yeah. Yeah.
what I've done.
So, have you ever have just so you know, we are running on a really short little time. We have until 8:30, I'm pretty sure. So I'm just gonna ask maybe like two more questions and then we'll close out.
Okay, Annie.
Um, so we'll go on to just parenting and well, actually no, we'll ask one more questions about school and community. Um, so what do you wish more educators understood about adoption and trauma?
Um, I think you have to look at the child. Um, Adoption, I think schools need to be a little bit more sensitive. I remember years when you are all asked to do a family tree. which caused, when you're little, it causes a little bit of um, angst, anxiety. And you have to simply tell the teacher, or if you know something's coming up, this project's coming up, my child is not going to feel safe doing it. So either please come up with an alternative or, excuse them out of that. Like
Yeah.
you can't expect someone who's in second or third grade to be talking about a family tree when some of them might not even know what that family tree is.
Yeah. I remember even like health class, like we had to do something like that, and it was like about kind of similar. It was more so like about what biological features did you get from your
Genetics.
parents?
Mm-hmm.
Genetics, yeah, that. And I was like, I had no idea, and I was really upset about it, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like the only kid in the class that didn't have an answer for that. We had to like do a project on that. I just remember being upset. But that just that little thing, like that little like just not knowing was stressful and annoying. But
That's why I
um
think you, as a parent, you have to know your teacher. You have to know them. Obviously, if that child is Asian or African American and you are not, that they know your face and they know I'm their mother, but they are adopted.
yeah.
And so you have to just be sensitive to that.
Yeah, because I feel like some teachers like could really take the time to understand that. But unfortunately sometimes they just don't, and that could suck, but it's all about the teacher and of course advocating for your child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now I want to talk a little bit about you. Um, how do you take care of your own mental health and well-being as a parent?
Yeah, it can be a struggle at times. I think you have to find an outlet. I'm not a big exerciser, but I think that's a way to relieve it. Um, I'm a huge reader. I read probably two or three books a month. That definitely has helped me. I think when you're a parent and you need to step away, you just need to say, I need 5 minutes to myself. And when you were little, sometimes I would just, go into the bathroom for 5 minutes. So sometimes you just need to take a deep breath. But if your mental health is not um, the best, you can't possibly help your child.
Yeah,
And you
100%.
have to take care of just maybe getting your nails done, or like I go every month to the salon to get my hair done. It's the one thing I do for myself that I do every month, and I do it by myself. And
Mhm.
I think, again, you have to set something up for yourself because
Yeah.
being a parent is stressful.
I think that's a very powerful message, like taking care of yourself, because it's not selfish, it's a necessity for everybody's happiness, like at the end of the day.
If you're steering the ship and you run it aground, no one's going to be okay. So you
Yeah,
have to be healthy and happy. And how else are you going to steer your children?
100%. For my last question of the day, what advice could you give to parents raising children with trauma histories or just like a parent who has recently adopted?
Patient. You got to be patient. You got to advocate for your child. You have to know that there are limits, especially a child who comes from trauma. There's limits, but there's help. If you don't know, educate yourself.
Yeah.
Look around, ask for help, ask the school district. Don't take no for an answer the first time. Ask again and again. Um, and you just have to like be a mama bear. You just do.
Show up every day. Yeah,
And
I
yes, you
love
have to
that.
be, everything has to be, again, a consistent schedule, especially with small children. You have to, they have to have structure. Um, and then you raise beautiful, smart, intelligent, um, young people and you send them out into the world. And very proud of all my
Yay!
children.
That makes me so happy. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your heart and all of your advice.
You're welcome.
I know that this conversation is going to help so many people who are trying to build more trauma-informed spaces for children, which is so needed, especially in today's world. And thank you for everybody who listens to this. Remember, trauma-informed care starts with connection, understanding, and patience, and every small step we take matters. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.